Hello, my name is Sherry Meinberg and my video presentation is about Mexican Surrealism. In this video, I will be discussing the Surrealist movement and how it came to Mexico. I will be focusing on why many European Surrealists immigrated to Mexico, how Mexican culture influenced these artists, as well as how Mexican artists took Surrealism and made it their own. In 1936, when it was becoming dangerous to be a Surrealist artist in Europe due to the Nazi regime, Guatemalan poet Luis Cardoza y Aragon wrote a letter to André Breton, one of the founders of the Surrealist movement, and encouraged him to leave Paris and come to Mexico. In this letter he wrote, "We are in the land of convulsive beauty, the land of edible delusions, a place for the mutable, the disturbing, the other death. In short, a land of dream, unavoidable by the Surrealist spirit." Breton couldn't resist the call. The Surrealist movement started in Europe around 1917, but really hit its stride in 1924, when the poet André Breton published his celebrated work, The Surrealist Manifesto, which called for art and literature to be influenced by unconscious feelings and dreams instead of reason and reality. Many artists joined this movement. Some of the most notable artists were people like René Magritte. His painting Son of Man starts out as a normal portrait, but he paints a green apple that almost fully covers the subject's face. There is also Joan Moreau, whose paintings Harlequin's Carnival has a very Hieronymus Bosch feel to it. Max Ernst was a very early surrealist, and here in his painting The Elephant Celebes, he has used industrial-looking objects to create an elephant. The last artist is Salvador Dali, who's arguably one of the most recognized surrealists of the time. He is known for painting landscapes that are fantastical but can borderline on the nightmarish. The painting, The Persistence of Memory, with its desert landscapes and melting clocks, is probably his most famous work of art. Please keep these paintings in mind so that when we look at the works of the Mexican Surrealists, we can compare how the European artists used Surrealism as an escape from reality versus how Mexican artists used Surrealism to express their reality. In 1907, Hitler was an aspiring artist, but he was rejected twice by Vienna's Academy of Fine Arts. As he rose to power, this rejection helped fuel his campaign against the modern art movements, and as Führer, he decreed that art movements like Dadaism, Cubism, and Surrealism were to be considered degenerate art and a threat to the German national identity. In 1937, the Nazis removed some 16,000 works of art from museums around Germany and destroyed most of them. Hoping to scorn these works of art, Hitler set up the Degenerate Art Exhibition, which was visited by some 2 million people. Fearing for their safety, many of the Surrealist artists left Germany for Mexico, as Mexico had less strict immigration laws than the United States at the time. When the Surrealist artists settled in Mexico, they found a plethora of inspiration for their artwork. We only have to look at a few examples of artifacts from the Mesoamerican, Mayan, and Aztec cultures to understand why the Surrealists were so excited and inspired. Breton was only in Mexico for a few short months when he hailed it as the Surrealist place par excellence, and he began to coax other artists from his Parisian circle to join him. What caught Breton's attention was how Mexico had preserved its mythological past so that it was still present in the modern day. He was aware that Mexico still was living in a magical atmosphere that should clash with modern ideologies, but instead managed to coexist with them in perfect harmony. Many of the Surrealists who had fled to Mexico for safety ended up living there for the rest of their lives, and their artwork is now considered Mexican Surrealism, even though they were immigrants to the country. In Wolfgang Palin's Combat to Princess Saturnine's 3, we can see the influence of the flying serpent as well as other zoomorphic mythological creatures. Gordon Onslow Ford's The Circuit of the Light Knight Through the Dark Queen looks to take on the myth of Mexico City being the center of the earth as a portal into another realm. And last, Esteban Francis's painting, Dawn, brings in all the colors of Mexico into an abstract but playful interpretation. The immigrating European Surrealists definitely influenced their Mexican artist contemporaries. However, where the European artists' works were fantastical and otherworldly, the artists of Mexico used Surrealism as a way to express the difficulties of what they had suffered through. With the Mexican-American War, their own Revolutionary War, and both world wars still fresh in their mind, Surrealism gave these artists a new way to express their hardships and pain. Carlos Orozco Romero's The Pledge is a portrait of a possible penitent who was making a pilgrimage to San Juan de los Lagos in Jalisco. Her face is wrapped, which takes away her identity, and the thorny Nepalese cactus petal could be a reference to the crown of thorns Jesus wore. This is most likely a criticism of how the Catholic Church was treating the native Mexican people. Juan Serenos' The Dead Girl he was created in memory of all the children that had tragically died in his village. The image of the child surrounded by flowers appears to be a juxtaposition of life and death. Maria Izquierdo's The Prisoner appears to be a harsh criticism on how women were treated during the recent wars that Mexico was involved in, and Gunter Gurzo's cenote is an abstract image of a natural sinkhole. These natural wells were possibly used by the Mayans as both a place for offerings and human sacrifice. Another way that Mexican Surrealism differed from its European counterpart is that women artists in the Surrealist movement were celebrated instead of being relegated to the role of muse. Remedios Varo, Katie Horna, and Lenora Carrington were regarded as some of the finest women artists to come out of the Mexican Surrealist movement. Of course, we cannot talk about Mexican Surrealism without talking about Frida Kahlo. Kahlo is one of the most recognized and celebrated Mexican artists today. She has even begun to overshadow her famous husband, muralist Diego Rivera. Kahlo was creating Surrealist-style paintings before the Surrealist movement had made it to Mexico. When Brinton first visited her studio, she was working on What Water Gave Me, and his response to the painting was to invite her to exhibit in Paris. Although Kahlo participated in many Surrealist exhibitions, she resisted being labeled as a Surrealist. She has been quoted as saying, "I never knew I was a Surrealist until Andre Brinton came to Mexico and told me I was one. I myself still don't know what I am." Kahlo had a difficult life, from surviving polio and a bus crash to a turbulent marriage to Diego Rivera. But through all her pain, she created many beautiful and awe-inspiring works of art. The love and embrace of the universe shows that later in their marriage, she had moved on to a more mothering role towards Rivera than as a wife. The painting Moses shows her desire to have a child even though she was unable to do so because of the injuries that was sustained in the bus crash. The painting The Dream shows how she only escapes her bodily pain when she's asleep, and the skeleton above her represents the pain waiting for her to reawaken. And last is The Wounded Deer, which is probably my most favorite painting of hers. She painted this to show how she felt defeated after a surgery that was supposed to help her with her back pain, but it actually made it worse. For Kahlo, her art was often her only means of escape of the pains of her reality. As I wrap up my presentation on Mexican Surrealism, I'm going to leave you with this quote by Salvador Dali, which perfectly sums up the Mexican Surrealist movement. "There is no way I'm going back to Mexico," he said. "I can't stand being in a country that is more surrealist than my paintings."